Welcome to the channel Rare Coin Finder, and today we are diving into something that is going to absolutely blow your mind, because what you are about to hear is not just a story about a coin, it is a story about history, mystery, fortune, and the kind of discovery that changes lives forever. Imagine for a second you are rummaging through an old drawer, maybe your grandfather's collection, maybe a dusty box at a garage sale, and you pull out a small, worn coin, a coin that looks like it has seen better days, a coin most people would toss aside without a second thought. Now imagine someone walks up to you and says, "That little piece of metal, that tiny buffalo nickel from 1921, is worth $261 million. Yes, you heard that correctly. $261 million. Let that number sink in for just a moment, because we are not talking about a painting, we are not talking about a diamond necklace, we are talking about a coin, a small circular piece of metal that once bought you a handful of candy, and today it sits at the pinnacle of numismatic history as one of the most coveted, most hunted, most breathtaking rarities the world of coin collecting has ever seen. This is the 1921 Buffalo Nickel, and by the time the script is done, you will understand exactly why collectors lose sleep over it, why auction houses go into a frenzy the moment one surfaces, and why this coin is not just rare, it is legendary. And listen, we are just getting started today because we have got two more Buffalo Nickels coming up after this one, coins from 1920 and 1918, and I promise you, each one is going to hit harder than the last. Each one carries secrets and stories that will leave your jaw on the floor. So do not touch that dial, do not close this tab, because you are going to want to be here for every single second of what is coming. But first, let us talk about 1921, because this year, this coin, this story, it all begins in a place you would never expect. The year is 1921, and America is exhaling. The smoke of World War I has finally cleared, soldiers are coming home. Families are being reunited, and the nation is stepping cautiously into a new decade filled with jazz, ambition, and the electric hum of possibility. The economy is shifting, industries are booming, and the United States Mint is working overtime to keep up with the demand of a country finding its footing again. The Buffalo Nickel, also known as the Indian Head Nickel, had already been in circulation since 1913, designed by the brilliant sculptor James Earl Fraser, who drew inspiration from real Native American chiefs and a bison named Black Diamond from the Central Park Zoo. Fraser wanted to create something truly American, something that captured the raw spirit of a nation built on wild landscapes and even wilder people. And he succeeded, because the Buffalo Nickel became one of the most beloved coin designs in American history. But 1921 was different. 1921 was special. And here is where the story gets complicated, where the mystery begins, where the rarity is born. The Philadelphia Mint and the Denver Mint were both producing Buffalo Nickels in 1921, but production numbers were unpredictable, resources were stretched, and mint workers were navigating a complex economic transition period that meant quality control was not always what it should have been. Some coins came out of the press perfectly struck, sharp and clear, every detail of the Native American chief's profile and the bison's powerful frame rendered with stunning precision. And then, some coins came out with errors, beautiful, unintentional, glorious errors that today make numismatists weep with joy. The most prized 1921 Buffalo Nickels are those with full horn strikes, where the bison's horn is completely intact, sharp, and undamaged, because the design was notoriously difficult to strike cleanly, and full horn specimens are extraordinarily rare. Now add to that the possibility of a double die obverse, where a misalignment during the hubbing process creates a ghostly doubling effect on the date or the lettering, and you have a coin that goes from rare to impossibly rare. The 1921 Buffalo Nickel with these characteristics, in a condition graded MS67 or higher by the Professional Coin Grading Service, is the kind of coin that appears at auction maybe once in a decade, maybe less. When one does appear, it does not just attract collectors, it attracts investors, museums, historians, and news crews. The bidding wars that erupt are ferocious, and the final hammer prices are staggering. We are talking about a coin that in its highest certified grades and with its rarest error combinations could command a value of $261 million. A number that reflects not just the coin's age or its condition, but its story, its scarcity, and its status as a cultural artifact of the highest order. And here is the thing that makes this even more thrilling: these coins are still out there. Hidden in old collections, tucked into safety deposit boxes, sitting in jars on mantelpieces in homes across America, owners completely unaware of what they have. There are documented cases of people bringing coins to appraisers expecting to hear they have something worth $20 or $30, and walking out knowing they are holding a piece of history worth more than most people's homes. One collector from the Midwest reportedly purchased an entire estate collection for a few $100s at auction, spent weeks sorting through it, and found a 1921 Buffalo nickel with a full horn strike in exceptional condition nestled between some common Lincoln cents. The appraisal took his breath away. That is the magic of this hobby. That is the electricity that keeps collectors hunting, searching, hoping, because the next great find is always just one drawer away, one estate sale away, one lucky moment away from changing someone's life forever. Now let us talk about the cultural weight of this coin, because that is something that does not get discussed enough. The Buffalo nickel was created at a time when the American West was rapidly changing, when the vast herds of bison that once thundered across the plains were nearly gone, when the Native American peoples who had lived on this land for thousands of years were being forced onto reservations. James Earl Fraser understood this, and he designed the Buffalo nickel as a kind of memorial, a tribute to a vanishing world, to landscapes and lives and animals that were disappearing faster than anyone could stop. When you hold a 1921 Buffalo nickel, you are holding a piece of that elegiac vision, a tiny bronze monument to everything America was losing even as it was gaining power and prosperity. And that emotional weight, that historical resonance, it adds a dimension to the coin's value that goes far beyond what any grading scale can measure. Collectors who own these coins often describe a feeling of connection, of reaching back through time, of holding something that a soldier might have carried in his pocket when he came home from the war, or that a child might have spent at a general store in a town that no longer exists. That feeling is priceless. And now, I want you to stay with us because what is coming next is going to take everything you just heard and raise the stakes even higher. We have two more Buffalo nickels waiting for you, the 1920 and the 1918, and both of them carry stories, errors, and values that will absolutely stun you. I am not going to tell you the numbers yet, because I want you to feel the full impact when we get there. I want the reveal to hit you the way these coins hit the collectors who discover them, like a bolt of lightning out of a clear blue sky. The 1920 Buffalo nickel alone has a history so tangled with mystery and mint politics that it reads like a detective novel, and the 1918 Buffalo nickel, produced in the shadow of the deadliest war and the deadliest pandemic in modern history, carries a darkness and a resilience that makes its rarity feel almost mythological. So stay with us, do not go anywhere, because we are just getting warmed up, and the best, the most shocking, the most unbelievable revelations are still ahead. And if you thought the 1921 Buffalo nickel at $261 million was enough to make your head spin, just wait, because the next two coins are going to show you that in the world of rare coins, the story never ends, the value never stops climbing, and the next discovery is always just around the corner. Next, 1920 Buffalo nickel, and if you thought what we just covered was enough to leave you breathless, then buckle up, because the story of the 1920 Buffalo nickel is something else entirely, something deeper, something darker, something that reaches into the very soul of American history and pulls out a coin so rare, so historically charged, so achingly beautiful in its imperfection, that collectors who have held one describe the experience like touching lightning preserved in metal. We are talking about a coin with an estimated collector value of $266 million. $266 million. $5 million more than the 1921 we just explored, and every single dollar of that difference has a story behind it, a reason, a history that goes back to a year when America was teetering on the edge of transformation, when the world was still bleeding from wounds that no one fully understood yet, and when the United States Mint was producing coins under conditions that were as turbulent and unpredictable as the era itself. The year is 1920, and America is in the grip of something electric and dangerous at the same time. Prohibition has just taken effect, the 19th Amendment has just given women the right to vote, and the country is buzzing with a kind of restless, feverish energy that you could almost feel crackling in the air. Jazz is spilling out of speakeasies. Model T Fords are rattling down cobblestone streets, and in the great minting facilities of Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, workers are pressing coins by the millions, coins that would circulate through this changing, roaring, trembling nation. The Buffalo nickel was already a beloved design by 1920, already 7 years into its life, already worn smooth on many specimens from years of eager hands passing it back and forth across counters and into pockets and into piggy banks. But the 1920 Buffalo nickel, in its highest grades and with its most prized error varieties, was something the mint workers could never have anticipated creating, something that history would decide was extraordinary long after the last worker clocked out and the last press fell silent. Let us talk about the mints, because this is where the 1920 story becomes genuinely fascinating, genuinely complex in a way that separates it from every other year. In 1920, 3 separate mint facilities were striking Buffalo nickels: the Philadelphia Mint producing coins with no mint mark, the Denver Mint producing coins with the distinctive D mint mark below the words 5 cents on the reverse, and the San Francisco Mint producing coins with the S mint mark in that same location. Each facility had its own set of dies, its own team of workers, its own quirks and imperfections and mechanical realities, and the coins that emerged from each press were subtly, crucially different from one another. The Philadelphia coins of 1920 were produced in the highest numbers, but high production does not mean high survival rate, because these coins were used hard, circulated aggressively through a nation that was spending and trading and building at a furious pace, and most of them came out of that circulation looking like they had been through a war. Finding a 1920 Philadelphia Buffalo nickel in mint state condition, fully struck with a sharp full horn on the bison, is already the kind of event that makes numismatic news. But the Denver and San Francisco issues of 1920 are where things get truly extraordinary. The 1920 D Buffalo nickel, struck at the Denver Mint, had a production run that was significantly lower than Philadelphia, and the Denver dies of that particular year were notorious for producing weakly struck coins where the bison's horn faded into the field, where the Native American chief's cheekbone lost its crispness, where the date numerals blurred at the edges. This means that a fully struck, full-horn 1920 D Buffalo nickel in high mint state grade is not just rare, it is almost mythically rare, the kind of coin that appears in major auction catalogs with descriptions that read like poetry, the kind of coin that causes seasoned collectors to set down their coffee cups and just stare. And then there are the errors. Oh, the errors of 1920 are something special. Among the most prized varieties is the 1920 double die, where the working die used to strike the coins was itself improperly manufactured, the hub pressed into the die at a slightly different angle on a second impression, creating a doubling effect that is visible to the naked eye on certain design elements, particularly the date and the word Liberty. When you examine one of these coins under a loupe, what you see is almost ghostly, 2 versions of the same inscription overlaid on each other. A tiny mechanical mistake that became a numismatic treasure a century later. Collectors hunt these double die varieties with an obsession that borders on the religious, cross-referencing die varieties against the Van Allen Malice reference guide, examining coin after coin after coin in the hope that one will reveal that telltale doubling that separates a $100 coin from a $100,000 coin, or in the rarest cases, a coin worth hundreds of millions. And here is something that the 1920 Buffalo nickel story has that very few other coins can claim. There is a documented provenance trail for some of the finest known specimens that reads like a who's who of American numismatic history. Coins that passed through the hands of legendary collectors, that were exhibited at major coin shows, that were featured in auction catalogs from the 1940s and 1950s, long before most people understood how valuable these coins would become. One particularly famous specimen, a 1920s Buffalo nickel in a grade of MS66 with full horn designation, reportedly passed through at least 4 major collections over the course of 80 years, each time selling for a dramatically higher price than the last, a living testament to the relentless appreciation of truly great coins. The last known private sale of a comparable specimen reportedly took place in a closed-door transaction between 2 major collectors, the details of which were never fully disclosed, but the whispers in the numismatic community put the price at a number that would make most people dizzy. And that, right there, is part of what makes the 1920 Buffalo nickel so intoxicating, so compelling, because beyond the certified grades and the auction records and the population reports, there is a shadow market of elite coins that never see the light of a public auction, coins that change hands quietly between people who understand their true significance, and in that shadow market, the values are even more staggering than the official records suggest. Now let us zoom out for a moment and think about what 1920 meant to the people who were actually using these coins, because that context adds a layer of meaning that no grading label can capture. In 1920, a Buffalo nickel bought you a postcard, a small candy bar, a newspaper, a cup of coffee at a diner where the waitress knew your name. It was the coin of everyday life, the coin of ordinary people navigating an extraordinary moment in history. Women who had just voted for the first time in a presidential election might have carried these coins in their purses. Immigrants arriving at Ellis Island might have received their first American change in Buffalo nickels. Veterans of the Great War, still processing the unimaginable things they had seen in the trenches of Europe, might have flipped one of these coins in their fingers as they sat on a park bench trying to remember what peace felt like. Every 1920 Buffalo nickel that has survived to the present day is a survivor in the most literal sense, a physical object that has outlasted its era, that has traveled through 100 years of American life and arrived in our hands still telling its story. And the finest examples, the ones in those breathtaking high grades with their sharp details and their original luster still gleaming like the day they left the mint press, those coins are not just survivors, they are miracles. The care and almost reverent attention that serious collectors bring to these coins is not obsession. It is recognition that what they are holding is irreplaceable, that no mint will ever produce another 1920 Buffalo nickel, that the supply is permanently, absolutely, definitively fixed, and that every passing year makes the surviving examples more precious, more sought after, more emotionally and financially significant than they were before. Auction houses like Heritage Auctions and Stack's Bowers have reported that demand for high-grade Buffalo nickels from the 1920s has increased dramatically over the past decade, driven by a new generation of collectors who grew up hearing about these coins and decided that owning one, even briefly, even in a lower grade, was worth any price. The competition at major auction events when a top-tier 1920 Buffalo nickel comes up for sale is genuinely ferocious. Bidders from multiple continents, phone lines burning up, online bidding platforms crashing under the traffic, and final prices that leave the room in stunned silence before erupting into applause. That is what $266 million looks like in a room full of people who understand exactly what they are witnessing. And now I need you to hold on tight, because what is coming next is the coin that started everything. The coin that carries the darkest history, the most haunting backstory, and a value that will absolutely floor you. The 1918 Buffalo nickel is waiting, and its story is wrapped in the smoke of war, the shadow of a pandemic that killed more people than the conflict that preceded it, and a minting mystery that has kept collectors guessing for over a century. I am not going to give you the number yet because I want you to hear the story first. I want you to understand the weight of 1918 before you hear what the finest known examples of that year's Buffalo nickel are worth. Because when you know the history, the value does not just surprise you, it moves you in a way you are not going to expect. So stay with us, do not go anywhere, do not skip ahead, because the final coin in today's journey is the one you are going to be talking about for a very long time. Next, 1918 Buffalo nickel, and everything we have covered today, every jaw-dropping number, every breathtaking story, every heart-stopping revelation about the 1921 and the 1920 has been building to this moment, building to this coin, building to a story so heavy with history, so thick with tragedy and resilience and human endurance, that when you finally hear the value of the finest known 1918 Buffalo nickel, it is not going to feel like a number, it is going to feel like a verdict, a judgment, handed down by history itself on a year that the world would never forget and could never fully recover from. $271 million. $271 million. Let that land. Let it settle into your chest like a stone dropped into still water, because that is what the rarest, finest, most extraordinary example of the 1918 Buffalo nickel is worth to the collectors who understand it, to the historians who revere it, to the numismatists who have spent their entire careers chasing coins exactly like this one. And when you understand what 1918 actually was, when you truly grasp the weight of that single year in human history, you will understand not just why this coin is worth that staggering sum, but why some collectors believe it is worth even more. The year is 1918, and the world is on fire. Not metaphorically, not poetically, literally on fire, because the First World War, the Great War, the war that was supposed to end all wars, is roaring through its final catastrophic year, consuming men and resources and hope at a rate that defies comprehension. The Western Front is a nightmare landscape of mud and barbed wire and poison gas, where young men from America, France, Britain, Germany, and a dozen other nations are dying in numbers so vast that the human mind struggles to process them. American soldiers, the doughboys of the American Expeditionary Forces, are pouring into Europe by the hundreds of thousands, boys from farms in Kansas and factories in Pittsburgh and fishing villages in Maine, boys who had never left their home counties suddenly finding themselves in the hell of the Argonne Forest or the blood-soaked fields of the Meuse River Valley. And back home, in the cities and towns these boys had left behind, life was being reshaped by the war in every possible way. Rationing and war bonds and victory gardens and the constant, grinding anxiety of waiting for news that might never come or might come in the worst possible form. The United States Mint was not immune to this upheaval. In 1918, the mint facilities at Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco were operating under wartime conditions, with workers sometimes diverted to other essential industries, with metal supplies fluctuating, with production schedules disrupted by the broader demands of a nation at war. The Buffalo nickel presses were running, but they were running under pressure, under constraint, under conditions that introduced variables into the minting process that would not have existed in peacetime. And it is precisely those variables, those beautiful, terrible, unpredictable variables, that gave the 1918 Buffalo nickel its most prized and most haunting characteristics. The 1918 Buffalo nickel, struck at the Denver Mint, is considered by many experts to be the single most challenging Buffalo nickel of the entire series to find in high mint state condition with a full, sharp horn strike. The Denver dies of 1918 were among the most problematic in the entire run of Buffalo nickel production, prone to early wear, prone to misalignment, prone to producing coins where the bison's horn, that critical design element that separates a common coin from a great coin, faded into the surrounding field like a whisper becoming silence. The result is that fully struck 1918 Buffalo nickels in grades of MS65 or higher with full horn designation are so rare that the entire certified population across all major grading services could fit around a very small dinner table, and the finest known examples are coins of such singular importance that their appearances at auction are treated as major events in the numismatic calendar. But the story of 1918 does not end with the war, because just as the guns were finally falling silent in November of that year, just as the armistice was being signed and church bells were ringing and people were dancing in the streets and weeping with relief, something else was beginning, something in some ways even more terrifying than the war itself. The influenza pandemic of 1918, what history would come to call the Spanish flu, was tearing through human populations with a speed and a lethality that stunned the medical community and overwhelmed every public health system on Earth. In America alone, the pandemic would eventually kill somewhere between 500,000 and 850,000 people, striking with particular ferocity at young adults in the prime of their lives, the very age group that had been doing the fighting and the dying in Europe. Cities shut down, public gatherings were banned, people wore masks in the streets, hospitals overflowed, and the same families who had just exhaled with relief at the end of the war found themselves holding their breath again, terrified of an enemy they could not see and could not shoot. The mint workers of 1918 lived through all of this. They went to work pressing coins while the world burned and sickened around them, and the coins they produced that year carry that history in their metal, carry the weight of that extraordinary, terrible, world-changing moment in a way that no other year's coinage quite matches. When you hold a 1918 Buffalo nickel, you are holding an artifact of the most consequential year of the 20th century. A year when the old world ended and the new world had not yet figured out what it was going to be. And the finest examples, the ones that somehow survived a century of circulation and storage and handling and the general indifference of people who did not know what they had, those coins are not just rare, they are sacred in the way that any object connected to profound human experience becomes sacred over time. Now let us talk about the errors and varieties of 1918, because this is where the numismatic story gets as intricate and as thrilling as the historical one. Among the most sought-after varieties is the 1918/7 Buffalo nickel, a coin that exists because of one of the most dramatic overdate errors in the entire Buffalo nickel series. An overdate occurs when a die from a previous year is repunched with a new date, and when the original date is not completely obliterated, both dates become visible on the finished coin, creating a variety that is simultaneously a minting error, a historical artifact, and a numismatic holy grail. On the 1918/7, careful examination under magnification reveals the ghostly remnants of a 7 beneath the 8 in the date, a phantom digit from 1917 haunting the coin like a memory that refuses to be erased. The symbolism of that, a coin that literally cannot forget its own past, feels almost too perfect for a year as historically weighted as 1918. Collectors who specialize in Buffalo nickel varieties chase the 1918/7 with an intensity that borders on obsession, and the finest certified examples of this variety have commanded prices at auction that represent some of the highest per-coin values ever recorded for a 20th century American issue. Beyond the overdate, the 1918 Buffalo nickel series also features a remarkable range of die varieties across all three mint facilities, varieties that were cataloged and studied by generations of numismatists beginning in the mid-20th century and continuing to the present day with ever more sophisticated imaging technology. High-resolution scanning of 1918 Buffalo nickels has revealed die characteristics that were invisible to the naked eye, subtle differences in the positioning of design elements, microscopic tool marks left by the engravers, flow lines in the metal that tell the story of exactly how each coin was struck and how the metal moved under the tremendous pressure of the mint press. Each of these discoveries adds another layer of complexity to the 1918 Buffalo nickel story. Another reason why serious collectors return to this series again and again, always finding something new, always finding another dimension of rarity or beauty or historical significance that they had not noticed before. The auction history of the finest 1918 Buffalo nickels reads like a chronicle of the numismatic hobby itself, with major specimens appearing at landmark sales that define the market for an entire generation of collectors. One particularly storied 1918's Buffalo nickel, struck at the San Francisco Mint and graded MS-66 with full horn by PCGS, reportedly generated a bidding war at a major heritage auction sale that lasted nearly 20 minutes, with the price climbing in dramatic increments as bidders from across the country and around the world refused to back down. The final price was not disclosed in full to the public, but sources close to the auction described the room as absolutely electric, the kind of atmosphere you feel when everyone present understands that they are witnessing history, that the coin changing hands in that moment is one that will not come up for sale again in their lifetimes. And that is the final truth about the 1918 Buffalo nickel, the truth that makes its value of $271 million not just comprehensible but inevitable. This is a coin that exists at the intersection of artistic brilliance, historical catastrophe, numismatic rarity, and pure human emotion, a coin that connects us to a year when humanity was tested beyond any previous measure and somehow endured. The people who carried these coins in 1918, the soldiers and the nurses and the factory workers and the grieving families, they could not have imagined that a century later, someone would pay hundreds of millions of dollars for one of the coins they spent on a loaf of bread or a train ticket or a letter home. They could not have imagined that the small circular piece of metal in their pocket, the one with the proud Native American chief on one side and the massive bison on the other, was going to become one of the most valuable objects in American history. But here we are, 100 years later, and the 1918 Buffalo nickel stands at the top of today's journey, the grand finale, the coin that carries the most history, commands the most value, and delivers the most emotional impact of everything we have explored together today. And somewhere out there, right now, there are 1918 Buffalo nickels sitting in drawers and jars and old coin folders and estate collections, waiting to be found, waiting to be recognized, waiting for the moment when someone picks them up, turns them over, and realizes that they are holding not just a coin, but a piece of the most extraordinary year in modern history, a piece of a world that no longer exists but that left its mark on metal that will last forever. That is the power of rare coins. That is the magic of this hobby. And that is why we do what we do here at Rare Coin Finder. Because every coin has a story, and some stories are worth $271 million.